I am not the only person who is thinking and talking about this. Perhaps you heard about a week and a half ago, attorneys from 41 states in Washington, D.C. filed a lawsuit against Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. The suit charges that they're targeting young users for profit and using manipulative tricks to keep them coming back. This is just the latest in a growing number of black marks against these industries. 5 months ago, the Surgeon General of the United States issued an advisory, and this is what he said. The most common question parents ask me is social media safe for my kids? The answer is that we don't have enough evidence to say that it's safe. And in fact, there is growing evidence that social media use is associated with harm to young people's mental health. Children are exposed to harmful content on social media, ranging from violent and sexual content to bullying and harassment. And for too many young children, social media use is compromising their sleep and valuable in-person time with family and friends. We are in the middle of a national youth mental health crisis, and I'm concerned that social media is an important driver of that crisis, one which we must urgently address. Now, that was not the first time that our Surgeon General's office has drawn attention to the mental health crisis, but it was the first time that they drew that clear link directly to social media. So what is going on? How did we go from social media being something that was pretty much light and fun to something that is increasingly looking dark and dangerous? Well, the first thing we need to remember is how young these platforms are. Facebook is only 17 years old. If Facebook was a kid, he would still be in high school, okay? And Instagram is 13. So Instagram is still in middle school. And they both look very much different than they did when they were toddlers. And so we're going to talk about how they have changed. The first major change that happened was almost right away, and that was the news feed. So if you are or can remember way back to 2006 when Facebook opened up to the world, you had to go to each person's page to see what was going on. Okay, so first you would go to Sam's page, and then you would go to Mark's page, and then you would go to Rebecca's page, and then when you ran out of people to check on, you would just get bored and log off, and you would be done. So what the Facebook staff did, and I think genuinely out of the goodness of their hearts, they were like, do you know what would make this experience a lot nicer for our users, is if we would gather all the new information that people are posting. So somebody's in a relationship, or somebody got out of a relationship, pictures maybe from a party, or status updates, and we will put them in a continuously scrolling list. Now, that continuously scrolling list was a direct borrow from cable news, which is kind of interesting. Remember with cable news that everybody watched, and there would be a scroll. There's always a scroll along the bottom in case you get bored with the person talking. We'll tell you some even more information. That's where they took that from. They thought this was going to be great. Everybody protested. It felt voyeuristic, like you were being forced to look at everybody else's stuff, and you were kind of getting thrown out there for everybody to look at you. But while Mark Zuckerberg apologized for the way he rolled that out, he did not roll it back. And that's because he could see on the back end that those same people were using Facebook twice as much as they had before. This is a total boon for Facebook, and you know it is because they have kept on using it, and every social media platform since has used some version of it. This changed, inadvertently, I think, changed social media in two important ways. One, you didn't have to go looking for content, it came to you. It would be like you're watching a movie, and instead of having to get up to go get the snacks, your mom starts bringing the snacks in a continuous line to you. This is gonna affect how many snacks you're gonna eat, right? The second thing is that before you were just posting for those couple friends who would come and look for you. And now you are posting for everybody that you went to middle school with and everybody that you went to camp with. So yes, you were always in that same public space, but it was like moving from, okay, before you were kind of in a corner booth of a restaurant talking to your friends, and now you're on the stage with a microphone and everybody's hearing everything you're saying. So you can see how right away that changes the nature of what you're posting. You're gonna say something different to just your couple of friends than you're gonna say from the stage, and you're gonna hold yourself differently, and you're probably gonna wear different clothes. Okay. The second major change, this is only a couple years later, all these changes are close together. Remember, these platforms are not very old, was the like button. In 2009, Facebook staff noticed a lot of comments were not very intellectually stimulating. They were things like, great, or glad to hear it, or that's nice. And they thought, if we could clear those out of the comment section, then people will have these substantial, wonderful conversations in the comment section, and we'll just put this button on here, and if you like it, just push like and move on. It'll be much faster for you, and you'll have a more efficient Facebook experience. That too changed the experience in two important ways. The first thing that it did was to put a public grade on every social interaction you ever had. So you could look and see how you were doing compared to your own self, like, oh, this post is doing better than this one, that post is doing better than that one. But you also could compare yourself to somebody else, right? Like, oh, I see that she's getting an A, and I see that she's getting a C, and I think I might be getting a B, and that person over there is clearly getting an F. All of a sudden, your social life was being graded publicly. The other thing it did, and perhaps you've heard of this before, is to create a gambling problem. So when you put up a post, that's not the end of your interaction. Everybody who posts pops back almost immediately to check and see if anybody has interacted with it or liked it, and then checks back maybe like a minute later, right? And then maybe like 5 minutes later. Like when you put up a post, you're thinking, I wonder what my grade is going to be, and I better keep checking back to see what that is over and over and over again. This is the same psychology that's used by slot machines in a casino, right? Because you're pulling that lever. I know this is going to cash out sometime. I'm wondering when it's going to cash out, and so I'm just going to keep checking back and back and back, because it's an uncertainty that our human brains don't love, and so we keep going back to it. Okay, and then in 2010, 4 months after the release of the iPhone 4, which was the first with a front-facing camera, we got Instagram. And now you could easily take pictures, edit them with some filters, and get them up on your social media site. This moved social media from primarily a verbal game, it used to be all about words, to primarily a visual game. Now it is far more about images than it is about words. And that did two things unexpectedly as well. The first is it ups the emotional connection, because I can tell you all day long and describe in great detail the cuteness of a little puppy who is very sweet and small and white and has big eyes, and I can talk to you about it for like an hour, and you'll just be like getting kind of bored, right? You're not feeling anything. But if I showed you a picture of that puppy or a kitten or a baby, you're gonna feel something. You'd be like, oh, that's so cute. There's something human in us that reacts to that, and that feels good, and you wanna feel that again, so you keep coming back. Another thing photos did was swing the door wide open for advertisers. So here's what advertisers know. Human brains process images way faster than they process text. So you can recognize the McDonald's arches or that Amazon Prime smile in 1/10 of a second. That's how fast we're processing images in our brains. So, and they hang around in your mind a lot longer than words do. You're gonna remember an image a lot longer than you're gonna remember a paragraph or even a sentence from a book. So before, if I'm an advertiser and I want to sell a t-shirt, what I have to do is buy an ad somewhere, like a billboard or in a newspaper or a television, or somehow I'm trying to get in front of my audience. Well, now what I can do is if I want to sell a t-shirt, maybe it's a Taylor Swift t-shirt, and I can say, and I know she's having a concert in Chicago, I can say, okay, social media platform, I want to show this advertisement for my Taylor Swift t-shirt to women between the ages of 10 and 50, and I want to do it for a month before and after the conference. Imagine the difference that makes to the advertiser, right? You are able to spend your money so much more effectively than you ever were before. And what you could also do is find a woman who is getting really, really, really good grades on her social media account and pay her and say, would you wear this t-shirt? And say how comfortable it is and how excited you are about the concert, and put a link in there, and then I could sell even more t-shirts, right? And that woman is thinking, that sounds great. I'm on Facebook anyway. I could just make a little bit of spending money from this. And I'm not saying this is wrong. This is just a thing that happened. Those women who were getting really good grades and began making deals, their content that they're posting changes. Now, instead of posting for their friends and family, they are posting content that is going to drive business. So their messages become a lot more thoughtful. Their pictures become a lot more beautiful, right? It's looking more and more like we're in a magazine than we are just chatting with each other as friends. Not only does that change her experience, that also changes the experience of everybody who's not getting those top grades, because now they are much more likely to be in an audience than they are to be going there to connect with their family and friends. And we're starting to see this in the studies, where before, far and away, the reason that Americans said they went to social media was to connect with friends and family. Now, increasingly, they are going there to find information and to buy things. So it just changes the experience for everybody. Okay. Next one is just almost more of the same. TikTok comes along, right? And short videos do to photos what photos did to images. They're more memorable, they're more emotional, they're more attractive. It's easier to reach a wider audience. You can get your message out a different way. It just basically pours gasoline on the fire that Instagram has already lit. And we cannot talk about TikTok without talking about algorithms, which are the computer code that pays attention to how long, where you're going, where you're spending money, how long you're pausing when you're scrolling. So algorithms are starting to get very, very good. So if a news feed is like your mom bringing you snacks while you're watching television, an algorithm is like noticing which snacks you picked and is now only bringing you your favorite snacks, and is actually, instead of putting them in front of you, kind of putting them right up by your mouth, right? So instead of you having a minute to pause and say like, gosh, I've already had 10,000 snacks, maybe I'll just take a break on the next one. Instead, the algorithm is saying, yes, but this is your favorite snack and it's already in your mouth. Why don't you just chew a little bit and you'll be doing great. So it just emphasizes more everything that we've been talking about. With every new change, social media becomes more economic, it's more of a business, and more engaging. This is not an accident if you have watched Social Dilemma, and it is working great. Social media users in the United States spend an average of 2 hours and 11 minutes a day on their social media accounts. If you break that down by age, teenagers average 4.8 hours a day on social media. And then if you break that down by gender, girls or boys average 4.4 and girls average 5.3 hours a day on social media. Now, do not think that there's sitting down from 5 to 10, right? This is 15-minute intervals here and there, like, oh, while I'm waiting for the bus to come, and like, oh, in between classes, and oh, maybe an hour or two here and there, but a lot of it is squeezed into those moments of their day. For that fact alone, it is important that we spend time thinking about how we use social media. Colossians 4:5 and Ephesians 5:16 tell us to make the best use of our time and to look carefully how we walk. And we can see how this online path we're walking has changed over the last 17 years. So how can we walk it faithfully? Since I am Reformed, I'm going to address that through the lens of what is good and what is broken about social media. And I'm going to start by borrowing some wisdom from Jen Wilkin. I worked on a book called Social Sanity in an Insta World, and she wrote one of the chapters in there, which was really good. And here's what she said. God is social, and he created us to be social too. He created flocks of birds and herds of elephants. Even tree roots have networks. God said to Adam, "It is not good for you to be alone." He communicates with himself, the Trinity. He communicates with us through Bible reading and through prayer. We communicate with each other. And on our best days, we are enjoying God's world together and rubbing against each other, helping to shape each other into the image bearers that we were meant to be. And on its best day, social media is a powerful way that people are drawn together across space in a way we could never do before. You can find people online where you say, oh, me too, right? And they can be halfway across the world. Social media can encourage us and delight us. It can connect us and inform us. It can draw us into prayer for someone else. It can cause us to worship and give thanks when we see someone announce a pregnancy or someone come to the Lord, or even just someone bringing order to a messy closet can cause us to give praise to the Lord. But there are also a few ways that social media draws us to rival God instead of to worship him. And it does this in the same way Satan did in the garden, through promising us that we can be like God. First, social media promises us we can be the influencer. We can be the one people want to be like. We can be the standard of truth and goodness and beauty. And while we can learn a lot from each other, that's true, desiring to be the influencer is a dangerous thing to do. And you guys, most of our middle school girls desire to be the influencer. If you ask them what they want to do for a job, that's what they want to do, like it's a job. But that place is for God alone, and for two important reasons, which of course you know. The first is that we're sinful, right? So holding ourselves up as a standard is to hold up a broken and crooked standard. But we are also changeable. We are constantly reacting to and being shaped by things in our lives, experiences and habits, people, books, screen times. Every day we are being changed, hopefully to look more like the image of the Lord, but not always. Okay, and we're always different. God is the only one who is unchangeable, the only one who is that perfect standard. I'm not saying this to throw any influencers under the bus, Christian influencers under the bus. I think that the Lord, sometimes there are women, and I know them, who are on social media and they are using it really, really well, and God is blessing that ministry and drawing to them people, but they don't go there with the idea that they are going to be the influencers. What they are doing on social media is they're going there with the purpose of, like, I am going to lift up God's name. I'm going to encourage somebody. Their purpose is different, and that makes all the difference in their own mental health and spiritual health. Social media can also promise us omniscience, right? That we can know everything that is going on, that we can respond to everything that is happening in the world, that we can be friends with everybody that we possibly ever can run across. But we are limited, and you know, if you ever see, you know, sometimes people take screenshots of their phone and it has like 2,000 notifications, or even if you have 30 notifications, you can start to feel a little bit anxious. That is your body physically responding to the fact that we are limited. God did not mean us to know everything. Only He knows everything and is intimately working good in every single situation. That is not our role. That is not for us to do. And that is just leading us to anxiety and overwhelm. I'll also add this, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it yet, so I'll just throw it out there. I am noticing more and more when I look on the social media pages of high schoolers and college girls that they are often alone in their pictures. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. They are increasingly by themselves, and their pictures are beautiful. They have some gorgeous background, and they are very well dressed. And once in a while there'll be a group shot, but normally they're just by themselves, increasingly by themselves. And that leads me to a couple more concerns that I have for our kids. For girls, I'm concerned about comparison. Now, this was always a problem for girls, right? Like, since the beginning of time, we're always kind of looking around like, ooh, how are you doing that? What are you going to wear there? Like, we're kind of measuring, making sure that we're doing okay looking, or maybe comparing ourselves like, oh, that girl over there has a really cute haircut, or wow, I wish I had her jeans, or whatever. You're looking at the girls in your class. But social media heightens that immensely. You're not just comparing yourself to the girls in your class, you're comparing yourself to every girl in the world, and most of them are edited, right? So you're comparing yourself to Teen Magazine every single day. Social media heightens girls' self-consciousness about their bodies, counts their friends, and puts that on public display. And it contrasts how they're using their time, the grades that they're getting in school, their internship opportunities, their boyfriends, with the best of those among their 1,000 friends. Okay, so they're comparing themselves constantly to everybody else's perfect world that they're putting out there. They can never win. The results are measurable. In the last 10 years, self-poisonings among 10 to 12-year-old girls quadrupled. Hospital admissions for self-harm tripled among 10 to 14-year-old girls. Major depressive episodes among 12 to 17-year-old girls increased by 52%. Emergency room visits for suicidal ideation and attempts nearly doubled among children and adolescents, and suicide among 10 to 14-year-old girls doubled. Last year, one out of three high school girls seriously considered suicide. We know some of those girls. For boys, my concern is pornography. Of teens who found porn accidentally, 18% of them found it on social media, probably because the other guys accidentally found it somewhere else first, right? You may have covenant eyes on your computer, but if your child has access to Instagram, he is looking at the bodies of girls, and those might be girls that are in his school or in his church youth group. And those girls might think they are dressing conservatively, and they tell me that they are, but I have looked. And while they are dressing conservatively, perhaps compared to some of their non-Christian friends, they are not dressing conservatively in a way such that you would want your young men to see that. I know youth pastors who have to stay, maybe you guys have to stay off of Instagram because of the pictures that your youth group girls are posting of their own bodies. For both boys and girls, I am concerned about shrinking attention spans. So 10 years ago, the average attention span of a person was 12 minutes. Today it is 5. Our television commercials used to be a minute long, and then that dropped to 30 seconds, and now often they're just 15 seconds long. This is a measurable attention span that we're losing. You can probably feel it. Maybe you used to be able to read for a really long time, or at least get through a chapter, or at least get through a page, right? And now, increasingly, you find yourself reaching for your phone. This is especially true for developing brains. Kids 5 or younger who have 2 or more hours of daily screen time are 8 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Those diagnoses have risen drastically, as you might expect, over the last 10 years. And if you see, and I've seen the charts, like during the pandemic, they just basically went straight up. When kids were on their screens all the time, those ADHD diagnoses just went through the roof. The more screen time we have, I think it's safe to say, the harder it is for us to concentrate. Some of the girls that I talked to described it as a buzzing in the brain. Like, I just have a buzzing in my brain all the time. I can't think complex thoughts when I'm on social media. And that's because, not because we're broken, but because when we get stimulation and reward every few seconds, we come to expect that. Our beautiful God-given brains adjust for that. Our brains are adjusting for what we're feeding into them, which makes the real world seem pretty dull. To sit here in this room can seem like watching paint dry when you're used to something changing every couple of seconds. Now, we don't have time to touch on all of the other problems. Bullying, hiding from adults in multiple accounts, interactions with ideas and movements that are too mature for them or that are simply wrong, but you know that they are there, and your kids know this too. This surprised me. Among teenagers, so 13 to 18-year-olds, those who said they liked social media a lot, used to be, in 2019 was 41%. It's now dropped down to 34%. They like social media less. Only a third of them say they like it a lot. Among 8 to 12-year-olds, 12% say they like social media a lot. So our kids are feeling this too. They're on it, but they don't love it. Okay, so we have a good thing. God created us to be social, and here are social networks, and then here we have sin all over the place. So, if the Bible tells us to look carefully how we walk, how do we do that? Let's get practical. The first thing we need is some intentional choices, because we know where drifting along is going to get us, right? Just farther down this algorithm rabbit trail. So I'm going to give you some questions that can help you start digging into this with your family or your youth group kids. And here's your very first question that you can ask. What should our social lives look like? Leaving social media aside, what do we want our social lives to look like? What does a God-glorifying social life look like? Here's my attempt at an answer. We want our kids to have a lot of friends, to have a lot of really good, deep friendships. We want them to run around with other kids who share their faith, iron sharpening iron, helping them to love Jesus more. We want these friendships to glorify God and grow the fruit of the Spirit in our kids. And at some point, we want them to run around with non-Christian kids who they can serve and maybe bring some of the lost to the Lord. We want these to be relationships that have deep talks and lots of laughing and having adventures together. We want our kids to know themselves, their own strengths and weaknesses and interests better by getting to know somebody else's strengths and weaknesses and interests. We want them to have friendships on foundations so solid they last decades. We want those friendships to anchor our kids in community, to support them when things are bad, and to amplify their celebrations when things are good. We want that for our kids. We don't want to compromise that. That's the gold standard. So then, once you can get in your mind, this is what I'm aiming for, the next question is, where does social media fit into that picture? And there's two answers, and I'm going to talk about them both. One is it doesn't, and one is it does. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about it doesn't, and then we'll talk about it does. Since the advent of social media, studies show that kids hang out less. They just are together less physically. They work less. They're less likely to go to parties, to date, to ride in cars for fun, to go to shopping malls, or to go to movie theaters. This is not tied to extracurriculars. The amount of time that we have spent doing that over the last 10 to 15 years has pretty much remained the same. It is tied to screen time. So we got a basic economics lesson here, right? There's always an opportunity cost. If I give some time to this, then I can't give some time to this. That's just true. We live inside limits. So to the extent that we let in social media, it is replacing some of those other activities. So how do I know if there's a place for social media in my kids' day? How do I know if, yes, this is a place for social media here, or no, we should get off of it altogether? Well, I bet nobody here prayed when they signed up for that first social media account, or before their kids did. I know I did not. And what an opportunity we missed, because we want to give that prayer to the Lord every time we do something, right? Should I be on here or not? Should I be doing this or not? Lord, direct me. What do you want me to do here? We did not take that seriously when social media first came along. Because that's true, here is a litmus test for when you can tell if your kids or the kids in your youth group should be on social media. And this is the question I would ask. Is she, in general, displaying more or less fruits of the Spirit when she is on? Is it leading her into or away from sin? So I got off about 1.5 years ago, but when I was on, I noticed I was easily frustrated with other posters. So I would log on wanting to be as gracious and generous, determined to be a gracious and generous user. But when I logged off, by the time I logged off, I did not feel gracious or generous to anybody. I thought, what a lot of irritating people there are on here putting up posts. I was consistently frustrated and exhausted by my time there, and that was a red flag. For me, social media is never the right answer to what's the best use of my time right now, for me. If you feel like the kids in your youth group or your own children are on too much and you're observing in them, boy, she is not displaying the fruits of the Spirit, or boy, this is leading her more into sin than away from it, then the way to get out of that, or what I would suggest, you can go cold turkey, and that works for some, or you can work on limits, right? So first you could just be like, we're going to take a break, and maybe it's a day. And then we're like, we're going to take a week break. We're going to take a month break. I am hearing from some that a month is sort of that golden time of like, a month is a really, really good break time. That will let people, it's long enough that they can get a real taste for being off and be able to compare how they were before and after. They will probably come back to their social media accounts after some of those breaks, but each time that they're off makes it easier for the next break. And it also, at least in my experience and the people that I've talked to, makes social media less attractive to come back to. So it is possible that you will have to do multiple. So if you're like every year, okay kids, we're taking our week off, or we're, like every 6 months we take a week off, or whatever that is not a waste of time. That is a muscle that you are slowly building over time. Another thing is that as you when you're taking one thing away from her or from him, you're gonna have to give her something else to do. So like if you took somebody off of cigarettes, they would have a craving, right? And you would give them a nicotine patch and it would get them through until they felt normal again. She's gotta have a social media patch. We gotta come up with something that will help her get off, right? So what is she supposed to do? Sit and stare at the wall? Even though she's probably at this point old enough to be able to come up with her own ideas, remember her brain its own imagination has not been sparked for a while. She's been staring at her phone for 5 hours a day. So she's gonna need an adult to come along and introduce activities to her to help her sort of come back into real life. That could be going to the gym, having friends over, going to the movies, going to a concert, going shopping, making cookies, painting something, reading a book, going rollerblading. What you will notice about these activities is that they're going to require something from you as an adult. First, they might require your time and energy. One thing that screens by us as parents and adults is time and quiet, right? So if we're going to ransom our kids' time back, we have to pay something. So part of it is going to be our own time, and part of it is going to cost money. You're gonna have to buy her those paints. You're gonna have to buy her those ingredients. You're gonna have to buy her those tickets to something. You might have to take her shopping and buy her clothes, right? But what you're doing is buying back that time that she would have just spent on her phone. Okay, so that's if you want to get off. Now let's talk about I do not think all Christians should leave, and I do think that some girls can handle some limited social media. So let's talk about what that could look like. The first thing I would ask your daughter or your youth group girl, if they do feel called to stay on and have talked through this with some wise friends, is why are we on here? Ruth Cho Simons, who has an excellent social media ministry, writes this out. She writes out a mission statement for her social media. I am on here to bring glory to God by evangelizing other people. Or it could be, I am on here to stay in touch with my other kids in my youth group. I am on here to communicate with my friends. Is this the best way to do that? Perhaps we could talk about maybe a group text would be a way that you could, an even better way to accomplish that same goal. I am on here just to share pictures of my life with my friends. Whatever it is, to figure out why are you on here, because how will you ever know if you're accomplishing it if you don't figure out what it is you're doing there? Okay, the second question that you can ask, why are we here? The second question is, if we get off track, how can we get back on? Because we're gonna get off track, right? How are we gonna get back on? Accountability is a gift that we give our children. Remember, your kids are young, probably younger than you think they are. Until they are 25, their brains are still developing. And so that while they are representing to you that they are fully formed adults, they are not fully formed adults. And the last thing that's developing in their brain is that executive control center that controls risks and rewards, which means they are not making great choices all the time. And they need you as the adults in their lives to make some of those choices for them. Another thing to keep in mind is that as she spends all that time in there, you know that blue light that wakes you up from the screen and it makes it hard for you to go to sleep, studies show that affects developing brains even more than adult brains. So if you feel woken up, the children are feeling even more awake than you do. So we need to be more cautious with them, not less. We need to put up more guardrails for them, not fewer. Check their phones, their laptops, their devices, know their passwords and use them. A teen who knows her mom is going to check her chat history is able to exercise a lot more self-control than a teen who knows no one will ever look at what she's saying. Statistics show that children in intact families with low screen use are less depressed, less lonely, less dissatisfied with life, and less sleep deprived. Giving that to your child is not invasive, that is love. So why are we on here? If we get off track, how are we going to know we're off track? And then how are we going to get back on? You can also think of legitimate consequences. And then the third question I would ask is, am I setting a good example? A Chicago pastor, I just read this, recently said that the kids who are growing up in a house or an environment in which adults are always on their phone will suffer the tech equivalent of secondhand smoke. Okay, so if you are always on your phone and not paying attention to them, they are suffering as well. When you are scrolling social media with your daughter, or when she is showing you something on her social media account, speak kindly about the post that you see. Stop, you don't have to rush through them. Stop to pray if you see, if you and her together see a post that is sad or needs some prayer. If you see somebody that lives in your area and could use some help, maybe somebody has a new baby or somebody broke their leg, reach out in real life and see if you can help that person. When you are at church, use those posts that somebody else has put up to enter into a real life conversation. Model for your girls what it looks like to have social media help you into and lead into real life conversations and relationship. And then cheerfully put down your phone a lot, especially when you're having conversations, and especially when you're having conversations with them. So I know this is heavy, and I know we're out of time, so I'm going to leave you with 2 pieces of encouragement. The first one is to start small. There is no need to go home and ransack all the girls' Instagram accounts instantly. Start with a prayer. We know we cannot do this alone. You will never do this in your own strength. You do not have a PhD in psychology and billions of dollars. So for you to be a counterweight to Meta, you're going to need some more help. So start with prayer. And just ask your girls, hey, let's hang out a little bit and maybe go for a walk and say, what does a good social life look like for you, right? Girls love to talk about their social lives. What is this? And usually I find them to be quite introspective, surprisingly so. They can articulate some of this, especially if they're older, like in college. They can explain to you what they don't like. And then once you talk about, like, what do you want your social life to look like? Ask them these questions. Like, how does social media fit into this? Or you can just say, hey, how are you feeling about social media these days? Do you enjoy being on there? Talk about what it's like to be on there. Hey, do you want to do an experiment with me where we stay off of social media for a couple days and see let's experiment on ourselves, right? It doesn't have to be drudgery. You can do it as fun. Let's experiment ourselves and do some fun things for a couple days and then talk about how we feel about it. Okay, but small steps are totally fine. This is a big, 5 hours a day is a lot to combat, so it's okay if you start small. And then second, remember, God's grace is big. Not every person is called to be on social media, but God is always there, right? He is sovereign over everything, and he knows our weaknesses and our stumblings. In fact, Romans 8:18 assures us he uses even those for good. And he is also not silent. Proverbs 3:5 and 6 tells us he generously gives us wisdom and guidance when we ask. So let's ask.